My name is Jarvis Thompson, and I just turned 67 last month. After 40 years as a financial advisor, I thought retirement would be peaceful. I never imagined my only daughter, Amanda, would show up at my door with her husband, Thomas, demanding $300,000 to pay off his gambling debts. When she slammed her hand on my coffee table and shouted, I barely recognized the little girl I raised. Before I tell you what was in that box that made them scream, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever dealt with entitled family members. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Portland. Nothing fancy, but comfortable enough. My parents taught me the value of hard work and saving. I put myself through college working nights at a local factory, graduated with a business degree, and slowly built my career as a financial advisor. I was never wealthy by any stretch, but I created a stable life through careful planning and discipline. When I met Diana at a friend's dinner party in 1980, my world changed. She had these sparkling green eyes that crinkled when she laughed, and a warmth that drew everyone to her. We married 18 months later in a simple ceremony. Diana was a kindergarten teacher, and we complemented each other perfectly. She brought joy and spontaneity to my methodical nature. 3 years into our marriage, Amanda was born. From the moment the nurse placed her in my arms, I was wrapped around her tiny finger. Diana and I had tried for children earlier without success, so Amanda felt like our miracle. Perhaps that was where the trouble began. We both doted on her, especially me. When she cried for a toy at the store, I bought it. When she wanted the expensive brand of clothes the other kids wore, I worked extra hours to afford them. Diana noticed the pattern before I did. Jarvis, we need to teach her that money doesn't grow on trees, she would say. But I always had an excuse. She's just a kid, or I want her to have what I didn't. Diana would sigh and try to be the voice of reason, but I often overruled her softer approach with my wallet. By the time Amanda turned 13, the entitled behavior was clearly established. Her birthday parties became increasingly elaborate affairs. I remember spending $5,000 on her sweet 16, renting a small venue and hiring a DJ. When her friends arrived with gifts from the mall, Amanda barely mustered thanks before complaining that someone had bought her the wrong color of some overpriced handbag. High school only amplified these tendencies. While other teenagers got after-school jobs, Amanda refused, saying it would interfere with her social life. Instead, she demanded a credit card for emergencies, which somehow included weekly manicures and designer jeans. Diana tried to implement consequences, but I undermined her efforts, unable to bear Amanda's tears and accusations that we did not love her. College was when things truly spiraled. Amanda insisted on attending Westfield University, a private institution with tuition triple what the state college would have cost. Dad, do you want me to get a second-rate education? She asked, when I suggested more affordable options. I caved as usual, taking money from our retirement fund to cover expenses. At Westfield, Amanda changed majors 4 times in 5 years. Each switch required additional semesters and more tuition. Her grades hovered just above the minimum required to avoid academic probation. Meanwhile, Diana and I postponed home repairs and vacations to keep up with the bills. During her final year at Westfield, Amanda met Thomas Walker, a business major with a charming smile and expensive taste. From the start, I had reservations. At their first dinner with us, he spent more time talking about his family connections than asking questions about Amanda or showing interest in her life. But she was smitten, and when I expressed concerns to Diana privately, she reminded me that Amanda was an adult making her own choices. The wedding proposal came after just 8 months of dating. Amanda immediately started planning what could only be described as a small coronation rather than a marriage ceremony. When I suggested a $10,000 budget, Amanda erupted, accusing me of trying to ruin the most important day of her life. The final bill came to $75,000, depleting a significant portion of my savings. Throughout all this, Diana remained my anchor, my voice of reason. But 2 years into Amanda and Thomas's marriage, Diana was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. The next 3 years became a blur of hospital visits, treatments, and watching my beloved wife slowly fade away. Amanda visited infrequently, always with an excuse about work or social obligations. When Diana passed 5 years ago, Amanda stayed for the minimum socially acceptable time after the funeral before flying back to her life across the country. Diana's death created a vacuum in our family dynamics. She had always been the mediator, the one who could reach Amanda when I could not. Without her, the emotional distance between my daughter and me expanded into a chasm. Our interactions became transactional, usually initiated by Amanda when she needed something. The pattern became predictable. A phone call out of the blue, some small talk, then the real reason for the contact. "Dad, our refrigerator broke. Can you help us out?" $5,000 sent. "Dad, Thomas had an opportunity to invest in this amazing business venture." $10,000 transferred. Each time, I told myself it was just a temporary situation, that they would get on their feet soon. Meanwhile, my own financial situation was not as robust as Amanda seemed to believe. Yes, I had saved diligently throughout my career and had a decent retirement fund, but it was designed to sustain me through potentially 20 or 30 years of retirement, not to function as an ATM for my daughter and her husband. I tried setting boundaries a few times. When Amanda called asking for $20,000 for a home theater system, I gently explained that I needed to be more careful with my savings now that I was retired. The conversation quickly turned ugly, with Amanda accusing me of being selfish and uncaring. "After all we have done for you," she said, though I could not recall what exactly she had done for me since moving out. Unable to bear her disappointment, I sent half the requested amount as a compromise. Last Christmas, Amanda and Thomas visited for exactly 4 hours. They brought the grandchildren, William and Emma, aged 8 and 6. The kids were sweet but clearly uncomfortable around me, their grandfather, who they saw perhaps once a year. Amanda spent most of the visit on her phone while Thomas inquired about my investments and whether I had considered selling my house. "It is too big for just you," he said, eyeing the property that had appreciated considerably in value. I began to dread their calls and visits, knowing each interaction would leave me feeling emotionally drained and financially lighter. Still, they were my family, my only family since Diana passed. I kept telling myself that maintaining the relationship, however flawed, was better than being alone. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April when the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone, so I was surprised to see Amanda and Thomas standing on my porch. Amanda wore oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy day, and Thomas kept checking his watch as I invited them in. "Dad, you look good," Amanda said, giving me a brief, stiff hug. I noticed she did not remove her sunglasses even after entering the house. "Thanks for seeing us without notice," Thomas added, his handshake firm but his eyes darting around the living room as if appraising items for sale. I offered them coffee, which they declined, and we sat in an uncomfortable triangle in the living room. The small talk was painfully forced. They asked nothing about my life, my health, or how I had been spending my time. Instead, Amanda commented on how the house seemed different, though nothing had changed since their Christmas visit, while Thomas repeatedly checked his phone. After about 10 minutes of this charade, Thomas cleared his throat. "Jarvis, we actually came to discuss something important with you." Amanda nodded, finally removing her sunglasses to reveal reddened eyes. "Dad, we are in trouble. Serious trouble." My heart immediately went to the grandchildren. "Are William and Emma okay?" I asked, already mentally calculating what I could liquidate quickly if they needed medical treatment. "The kids are fine," Thomas said dismissively. "This is about our financial situation." Amanda reached for Thomas's hand in a rehearsed gesture of solidarity. "Thomas has been going through some things, Dad. He has been under a lot of stress with work, and well, he developed a gambling problem." Thomas looked appropriately contrite, eyes downcast. I thought I could win back what I lost, but it just got worse. I felt a familiar sinking sensation in my stomach. "How bad is it?" Thomas and Amanda exchanged glances before she answered. $300,000. The amount hit me like a physical blow. "300,000? I repeated, certain I had misheard. "We would not ask if we had any other options," Amanda continued quickly. "But these are not normal creditors, Dad. These are dangerous people." Thomas leaned forward, his voice lowered dramatically. "Loan sharks. They have already sent guys to our house to deliver warnings. They mentioned the kids, Jarvis. The mention of my grandchildren being in danger sent a chill through me. But a lifetime in financial advising had taught me to look beyond emotional appeals to the facts of a situation. Have you gone to the police? I asked. Amanda scoffed. And tell them what? That Thomas illegally borrowed money from loan sharks? He could go to jail, Dad. We just need to pay them off, Thomas interjected. Then we can start fresh. I am already in Gamblers Anonymous. This was a wake-up call. I took a deep breath, trying to process what they were asking. $300,000 is not something I can just withdraw from the bank. Most of my money is in retirement accounts, with penalties for early withdrawal. Amanda's expression hardened. You have the money, Dad. It is just sitting there while you live alone in this big house. Meanwhile, your grandchildren could be in danger. We need it by tomorrow, Thomas added, his tone shifting from pleading to demanding. These are not people you want to mess with. Believe me. I stood up, needing space to think. I need some time to consider this. Maybe we can work out a payment plan with these people. Or I could help with part of the amount. Amanda rose to face me, her face flushing with anger. There is no time. Did you not hear us? These people are threatening our family. Your family. Just a few hours, I said, moving toward the kitchen. Let me look at my accounts and make some calls. Thomas blocked my path. We need an answer now, Jarvis. The guys are expecting payment tomorrow morning. The pressure tactics were becoming obvious. And with that realization came a moment of clarity. This was not about protecting the family. This was about using me as a bailout for Thomas's poor choices, just as they had done repeatedly on a smaller scale. Please, Dad, Amanda said, her voice softening into the tone she had used since childhood when she wanted something expensive. Mom would have given us the money without all this drama. The mention of Diana struck me like a slap. Diana, who had cautioned me for years about enabling Amanda's entitled behavior. Diana, whose final words to me had been about living my remaining years fully and with purpose. In that moment, I made my decision, but I knew expressing it directly would only lead to a scene I was too exhausted to handle. Instead, I nodded slowly. Okay, I said quietly. I will need to make some arrangements. Come back tomorrow morning, and I will have the money ready. The change in their demeanor was immediate and telling. Amanda's face relaxed into a smile, while Thomas clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. I knew you would come through for us, Dad, Amanda said, suddenly effusive. You always do. We will pay you back every penny, Thomas added, though we both knew that was a lie. They left shortly after, promising to return at 9 the next morning. I watched from the window as they got into their luxury SUV and drove away, already celebrating their successful manipulation. As their car disappeared around the corner, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in decades, I saw my relationship with my daughter with complete clarity, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. After they left, I sat heavily in Diana's old reading chair, the one I could never bring myself to get rid of after she passed. The house felt unnaturally quiet as I processed what had just happened. My own daughter had essentially threatened me with her children's safety to extract money for her husband's gambling debts. An ironic laugh escaped me as I recalled the advice I had given to countless clients over my career. Never loan money to family that you cannot afford to lose. How many times had I counseled people about establishing financial boundaries with adult children? Yet here I was, the financial advisor who had failed to manage the most important financial relationship in his life. The brutal truth was that I had enabled Amanda's behavior for decades. Each time I gave in to her demands, I reinforced the dynamic between us. Diana had seen it clearly, had tried to warn me, but my fear of losing my daughter's affection had overridden my better judgment. I pulled out my financial records and spread them across the dining room table. The reality was stark. Yes, I had saved diligently throughout my career, but $300,000 represented nearly 40% of my total retirement savings. At 67, with potentially 20 years or more ahead of me, such a withdrawal would significantly compromise my financial security. Despite what Amanda believed, I was not sitting on a mountain of unused wealth. As I shuffled through the papers, a small photo slipped out from between the folders. Diana, smiling at the camera during our trip to Yellowstone 5 years before her diagnosis. I remembered her words during one of our last conversations as she lay in the hospice bed. "Promise me you will not just exist after I am gone, Jarvis," she had said, her hand barely strong enough to squeeze mine. "Live fully. Do those things we always talked about." We had dreamed of traveling during retirement, of visiting the Grand Canyon and the national parks, of taking a cruise to Alaska. All those plans had been set aside first for Amanda's needs and then for Diana's illness. In that moment, staring at Diana's photo, I made my decision. This cycle had to end, not just for my sake, but for Amanda's as well. By continuing to rescue her from consequences, I was preventing her from developing the resilience and responsibility she needed. I called my lawyer, Stanley, who had been my friend since college. "I need to make some changes to my will," I told him, "and I need advice on protecting my assets." Stanley listened without judgment as I explained the situation. "I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning," he said. "Come by at 8. Next, I called my bank and arranged for most of my accessible funds to be transferred to a new account at a different institution, one that Amanda did not know about. I left enough in the original account to maintain appearances, but moved the bulk of my savings out of reach. I created a detailed spreadsheet of all the money I had given Amanda and Thomas over the years, from college tuition to the wedding to the numerous emergency loans. When I totaled it up, the figure stunned me. $547,000, more than $500,000 that would never be repaid. From my filing cabinet, I retrieved Diana's journal, which I had kept but never had the heart to read fully. I knew she had written about her concerns regarding Amanda. Those entries would go in the box. I drafted a letter explaining my decision and the boundaries I was establishing. The words flowed easily once I began. Years of unspoken feelings finally finding expression. I made clear that my love for Amanda was unconditional, but my financial support no longer was. I outlined conditions for any future relationship: respect, therapy, financial independence. For my grandchildren, I set up educational trust funds that could only be accessed for college or vocational training. They would not receive cash directly, nor would Amanda or Thomas be able to access these funds. As evening approached, I called my best friend Harold, who had stood by me through Diana's illness and the lonely years that followed. "I am leaving, Harold," I told him. "Amanda and Thomas came by today demanding $300,000 for gambling debts." Harold's initial shock gave way to understanding. "What do you need from me?" he asked simply. I explained my plan and asked if he would keep an eye on the house and update me on any developments. "Of course," he said. "But are you sure this is what you want to do?" "No," I admitted, "but it is what I need to do, for both Amanda and myself." After we hung up, I packed a single suitcase with essentials: clothes, toiletries, important documents, and a few precious mementos: Diana's wedding ring and the photo from Yellowstone, the watch my father had given me when I graduated college, a small album of family photos from happier times. I walked through each room of the house that had been my home for 30 years, saying goodbye to the memories embedded in every corner. Diana and I bringing baby Amanda home, birthday celebrations, Christmas mornings, Diana's last days in the hospital bed we had set up in the living room. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I making a terrible mistake? Would this permanent rupture with my daughter be worth it? Then I remembered the cold calculation in her eyes as she demanded the money, the way she had weaponized Diana's memory and the grandchildren's safety. I placed Diana's photo in my wallet for strength and called a taxi instead of taking my car. Amanda knew my vehicle and might spot it at the airport parking lot. Before leaving, I assembled the box that would await Amanda and Thomas's return. Into it went the itemized list of all financial support provided over the years. Diana's journal entries about her concerns for Amanda's character development, financial statements showing my actual retirement savings, far less than the fortune Amanda imagined, certificates for the grandchildren's educational trusts, and finally, my letter explaining why I had reached this breaking point. I sealed the box, placed it on the coffee table, and locked the door behind me. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, I felt a confusing mixture of grief, fear, and something unexpected: relief. The airport terminal was crowded with travelers, families reuniting, and business people hurrying to make connections. I stood in line at the ticket counter, my heart racing as if I were committing a crime rather than exercising my right as an adult to make my own choices. "One way to Phoenix, please," I told the attendant, sliding my credit card across the counter. I had researched retirement communities in Arizona the previous month, drawn to the warm climate that might ease my arthritic knees. What had been a vague someday plan was now my immediate reality. "Any checked baggage today, sir?" the young woman asked. "Just this one," I replied, lifting my suitcase onto the scale. One bag for my new life. Everything else I was leaving behind. As I moved through the security checkpoint, I felt exposed, as if Amanda might appear at any moment to confront me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Amanda. "Just checking that everything is on for tomorrow. We will be there at 9 sharp." I did not reply. Let her wonder. By the time she realized I was gone, I would be 1,000 miles away. Sitting at the gate, I turned my phone to airplane mode, severing the final connection to my old life. The boarding process began, and I shuffled forward with the other passengers, an anonymous senior citizen embarking on what looked like an ordinary trip. Once seated by the window, I found myself next to a chatty woman in her 50s named Barbara, who was visiting her daughter in Phoenix. She just had twins, Barbara explained, pulling out her phone to show me photos of 2 red-faced infants. My first grandchildren. "Congratulations," I said sincerely, thinking of William and Emma, who I might not see again for a long time, if ever. The thought created a pang of regret, but I reminded myself that the educational trusts would ensure they knew their grandfather cared about their futures, even if I could not be physically present. Barbara continued talking throughout the flight, which was a blessing in disguise. Her cheerful chatter about her family, her work as a dental hygienist, and her recent divorce kept me from spiraling into doubt about my decision. "Sometimes you have to make a clean break," she said when discussing her ex-husband, unaware of how relevant her words were to my situation, especially when the relationship becomes toxic. As the plane touched down in Phoenix, the desert sun was setting, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The dry heat hit me like a wall as I exited the terminal, so different from the damp chill of Portland in April. The taxi took me to a modest rental home I had secured through a retiree relocation service. The property was part of a planned community for people 55 and older, with a clubhouse, pool, and organized activities. My new address was 425 Saguaro Lane, a street named for the iconic cactus that dotted the landscape. The rental agent, a brisk woman named Judith, met me with the keys. "Everything is set up as requested, Mr. Thompson," she said. "Basic furnishings, utilities connected, internet active. The Homeowners Association meets every Tuesday, if you are interested in getting to know your neighbors." After she left, I stood alone in the small living room, surrounded by generic furniture that held no memories or emotional weight. The silence was profound. For the first time in decades, I was truly on my own, with no one's needs or expectations to consider but my own. That first night was the hardest. I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, replaying the events that had led to this moment, and imagining Amanda and Thomas arriving at my empty house the next morning. Would they be worried when they found me gone, or just angry that their source of easy money had disappeared? I must have fallen asleep eventually because I awoke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a disorienting moment, I did not know where I was. Then reality rushed back, and I reached for my phone, which I had plugged in but kept in airplane mode overnight. When I turned it on, the notifications flooded in. 17 missed calls from Amanda, 23 text messages, their tone evolving from expectant to concerned to furious. "On our way, 8:45 a.m. Where are you? We are outside. 9:10 a.m. Dad, this is not funny. Open the door. 9:25 a.m. We can see your car in the garage. We know you are home. 9:40 a.m. If you are having a medical emergency, we are calling the police. 10:15 a.m. They found the box. What the hell is this? Call me immediately. 11:30 a.m. You cannot just disappear like this. What about your grandchildren? 12:45 p.m. When I find you, you will regret this. How dare you abandon your family? 3:20 p.m. The messages continued, becoming increasingly threatening and guilt-inducing. There were also 3 voicemails from Harold. Jarvis, they are here looking for you. They are not happy about the box. They called the police to report you missing, but when the officers saw the note you left, they said it was clear you left voluntarily and as an adult. That is your right. Amanda is furious, just checking that you arrived safely. Call when you can. Amanda and Thomas left, but not before she screamed loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. The words were not flattering to you, my friend. I texted Harold from my new number. Arrived safely. Thank you for being my eyes and ears. We'll call later. Then I blocked Amanda and Thomas's numbers on my old phone. I would get a new number today, but I wanted to see their initial reactions first. According to Harold's subsequent report, Amanda and Thomas had arrived precisely at 9, expecting to collect the money. When no one answered, Thomas peered through windows while Amanda called my phone repeatedly. Eventually, they noticed the box on the coffee table, visible through the front window. After debating whether to break in, they called a locksmith, claiming a family emergency. Once inside, they opened the box and found its contents. The itemized list of financial support over the years shocked them into momentary silence. $547,000 laid out in black and white, with dates, purposes, and whether the money had been presented as a gift or loan, though none of the loans had ever been repaid. Diana's journal entries were apparently particularly upsetting to Amanda. My wife's elegant handwriting expressed her concerns about our daughter's character development in private pages never meant for Amanda's eyes. I fear we are raising a child who will never be satisfied, Diana had written when Amanda was 16. She takes Jarvis's generosity as her due, without gratitude or understanding of sacrifice. The financial statements showed my actual retirement savings, revealing that the $300,000 they demanded would have forced me to significantly compromise my future security. This contradicted the narrative Amanda had constructed about my vast, untapped wealth. The certificates for the grandchildren's educational trusts represented the only money they would receive from me, and it could only be used for education, not accessed as cash by Amanda or Thomas. Finally, my letter explained why I had reached this breaking point. I detailed the pattern of financial exploitation that had characterized our relationship for years. I established clear boundaries for any future contact and conditions for rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than monetary transactions. According to Harold, who heard from neighbors, Amanda's reaction was explosive. She screamed profanities, threw items around the house, and accused me of everything from mental instability to cruelty. Thomas was equally angry but more calculating, immediately trying to determine where I might have gone and how they might access my accounts without me. They made separate threats by text and voicemail. Amanda emphasized emotional manipulation. How could you abandon your family when we need you most? The grandchildren will grow up knowing their grandfather did not care enough to stay. Thomas took a more menacing approach. This is not over, Jarvis. I will find you, and you will regret playing games with me. Everyone has their price, including your precious friend Harold. That afternoon, I changed my phone number, keeping only Harold's contact information. I sent an email to Stanley, my lawyer, updating him on my new location and asking him to serve as a buffer for any legal matters related to Amanda and Thomas. Then I walked around my new neighborhood, introducing myself to those I met as Jarvis, just moved from Oregon. No last name, no details about family, just a retiree starting over. My next-door neighbor, Frank Delgado, was watering his immaculate front garden when I passed. He was around 70, with a military bearing and a firm handshake. "Welcome to Arizona," he said. "You will find most people here are starting over in one way or another. It is that kind of place." I did not know then how important Frank would become in my new life, or that he had his own story of family estrangement that would help me navigate the complicated emotions of the months ahead. The first month in Arizona passed in a blur of practical arrangements and cautious exploration. I established routines: morning coffee on the small patio, watching hummingbirds visit the feeder I installed, afternoon walks when the sun was less intense, evening reading in the quiet house. My neighborhood had a community center where various clubs met. Hesitantly, I joined the photography group, something I had always wanted to explore but never found time for during my working years. The members welcomed me without prying into my past, content to share knowledge about apertures and lighting techniques. Frank, my neighbor, invited me to join the community golf club, though I warned him I had not played in years. "Perfect time to start again," he said simply. Our weekly games became a fixture, followed by lunch, where our conversations gradually deepened beyond sports and weather. Harold called every Sunday, updating me on the situation back in Portland. Amanda and Thomas had made multiple attempts to access my bank accounts, showing up at my local branch with forged authorization documents. The bank, forewarned by my lawyer, refused. They told family members I was experiencing mental health issues and had run away during a breakdown. Some relatives believed them, especially those who had only heard Amanda's side of our relationship for years. Others were skeptical, having witnessed her entitled behavior at family gatherings. "Your cousin David called me," Harold reported during one Sunday call. "He said Amanda has been asking everyone for your whereabouts and spinning quite a tale about your supposed mental decline." David did not buy it. He remembered how Amanda behaved at Diana's funeral, on her phone most of the time. The news that Amanda had hired a private investigator to find me was concerning but not unexpected. I took additional precautions, using cash for most transactions and being careful about what mail I received at my new address. The investigator came by the house, Harold told me in June, asked a lot of questions about your habits, friends, favorite places. I played dumb, said you and I mainly talked about sports and home repairs, nothing personal. The first holiday after my departure, Memorial Day, was difficult. I declined invitations from new acquaintances, spending the day alone with memories and doubts. Had I been too harsh? Should I have tried one more time to establish boundaries while maintaining contact? Then I remembered the cold calculation in Amanda's eyes as she demanded money, using her children as emotional leverage. No, this clean break had been necessary. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from consequences. My friendship with Frank deepened after he found me sitting alone on my patio that evening, staring at my silent phone. He joined me without invitation, bringing 2 beers. "First holiday is the hardest," he said, handing me a bottle. When I looked surprised, he added, "I recognize the signs. You are not the first person to start over late in life." Over those beers, Frank shared his own story. His son had stolen his identity years ago, racking up massive debt in Frank's name. After helping his son through multiple rehab attempts and paying off debts repeatedly, Frank had finally cut contact. "Hardest thing I ever did," he admitted, but continuing to bail him out was killing us both. Frank's understanding helped me process my own complicated emotions. Relief at being free from manipulation, guilt about the grandchildren, anger at how Amanda had exploited my love for decades, and grief for the relationship I had hoped to have with my daughter. In July, Frank introduced me to Margaret Chen, a widow who volunteered at the community library. She had silver-streaked black hair, an easy laugh, and a refreshing directness. After our first conversation about books we both enjoyed, I found myself looking for reasons to visit the library more frequently. By August, I had established a new life with routines, activities, and budding friendships. I joined a financial literacy volunteer group, offering guidance to seniors about avoiding scams and managing limited retirement funds. The irony of giving others advice about financial boundaries was not lost on me, but perhaps my personal experience made my guidance more authentic. Meanwhile, Harold kept me updated on Amanda and Thomas's increasingly desperate situation. The loan sharks were still demanding payment, and without my bailout, they faced serious consequences. They sold their luxury SUV, downgraded to a smaller apartment, and began liquidating possessions. They sold Diana's silver service, Harold reported, referring to an heirloom I had given Amanda after her mother's death. Got maybe 1/10 of its value at a pawn shop. This news hurt more than I expected. The silver had been in Diana's family for generations, intended to be passed down, not hastily sold to cover gambling debts. Still, I reminded myself that they were adults making choices, just as I was. The most difficult news came in September, when Harold told me that Thomas's creditors had become more aggressive. Amanda called in hysterics yesterday. Said some men came to their apartment and made it clear the debt needed to be paid immediately. Thomas has been staying with a friend, leaving Amanda and the kids to deal with the fallout. My immediate instinct was to intervene, to protect my daughter and grandchildren. I even went so far as to look up flights to Portland. But then I received another update from Harold. Amanda and Thomas had sent the children to live with Thomas's parents in Seattle. Amanda told mutual friends they sent the kids away for their safety, but she is blaming you for the whole situation. Says if you had just given them the money, none of this would have happened. This shifting of responsibility was so familiar it almost made me laugh. Throughout Amanda's life, the consequences of her actions had always somehow become someone else's fault, usually mine. This pattern would never change if I continued to accept that misplaced blame. Instead of booking a flight to Portland, I contacted a lawyer in Seattle and established an educational trust for William and Emma that Thomas's parents could access for the children's benefit. I could not control Amanda and Thomas's choices, but I could ensure my grandchildren had opportunities when they reached adulthood. As I approached the 6-month mark of my new life, I realized something unexpected. I was happy, not just surviving, but thriving in ways I had not for years. My relationship with Margaret had deepened into romance, tentative and sweet as a second bloom. My photography had improved enough that the community newsletter published one of my desert landscape shots. My volunteer work gave me purpose. One evening in October, as Margaret and I walked back from a community concert, she asked gently, "Will you ever tell me the real reason you left Portland?" Until then, I had shared only the barest outline. Retired financial advisor, widower, seeking a fresh start. Nothing about Amanda, Thomas, or my abrupt departure. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the readiness of my answer. "When I am ready. But it is a long story." She squeezed my hand. "I have time." That night, alone in my house, I looked at the photo of Diana I kept by my bedside. "I think you would approve," I told her image. Not of how I left, perhaps, but of finally standing up for myself. The hard truth was that Amanda might never understand or accept my decision. She might continue to cast me as the villain in her story, the father who abandoned her in a time of need. But for the first time in decades, I was writing my own story, not sacrificing my well-being to be a character in hers. Almost exactly 1 year after my departure, Harold called with news that sent my carefully reconstructed world tilting on its axis. "Amanda knows you are in Arizona," he said without preamble. "The private investigator finally connected some dots through your credit card purchases. She is talking about flying down there." My hands grew clammy around the phone. "How soon?" "She booked a flight for next week." "I thought you should know." After we hung up, I paced my small living room, considering my options. I could relocate again, stay with Frank or Margaret temporarily, or simply face the confrontation that had been brewing for a year. In the end, I chose the latter. Running again would only prolong the inevitable. Besides, I was no longer the man who had fled Portland in fear and exhaustion. This year had strengthened me, clarified my boundaries, and surrounded me with people who respected them. I told Margaret and Frank about the situation, wanting them to understand if Amanda created a scene. Both offered their support, with Frank volunteering to be present during Amanda's visit if I wanted backup. "I can handle this," I told him, more confident than I felt. "But thank you." The morning Amanda was due to arrive, I sat on my patio with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the desert in gold and rose. Whatever happened today, I would face it with the clarity and strength I had developed over the past year. The knock came at 11:30, 3 sharp raps that somehow conveyed impatience. I opened the door to find Amanda standing there, looking simultaneously familiar and like a stranger. The year had aged her. Fine lines etched the corners of her eyes, and her hair showed strands of gray she had not bothered to color. She wore jeans and a simple blouse instead of the designer clothes she had favored, and her once manicured nails were cut short and unpolished. "Dad," she said, her voice carrying a complex mixture of anger, relief, and wariness. "Amanda," I replied, stepping back to let her enter. "Would you like some water? It is hotter here than you are used to." She accepted the water but remained standing, taking in my modest home with what seemed like disbelief. "So this is where you have been hiding while our lives fell apart." I gestured to the couch. "We should sit for this conversation." Reluctantly, she perched on the edge of the sofa, while I took the armchair across from her. The coffee table between us felt like both buffer and barrier. "You look well," she said after an awkward silence, sounding almost accusatory. "Really well, actually." "I am," I acknowledged. "How are William and Emma?" At the mention of her children, Amanda's composure cracked slightly. They miss their grandfather, the one who disappeared without saying goodbye. I nodded, accepting the barb. "I left a letter explaining my decision." "A letter?" she exclaimed. "As if that makes up for abandoning your family when we needed you most. Do you have any idea what we have been through this past year?" I maintained a calm demeanor. "Harold has kept me informed." This seemed to further incense her. "Of course, Harold knew all along. While I was worried sick that something had happened to you, that you were dead in a ditch somewhere, you too were laughing behind my back." "No one was laughing, Amanda. And my letter made it clear I left voluntarily." She leaned forward, eyes flashing. "Because we asked for help? After everything we have done for you?" The familiar script almost pulled me back into our old dynamic, but I caught myself. "What exactly have you done for me, Amanda?" The directness of the question seemed to startle her. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I am your daughter, your only child. Is that not enough?" "Being family does not entitle you to exploit others," I said quietly. "The $300,000 you demanded would have compromised my ability to support myself in retirement. You knew that, and asked anyway. Thomas's gambling was not my fault. Those people were dangerous, Dad. They threatened our family." "Where is Thomas now?" I asked, noticing she had not mentioned her husband. Amanda's shoulders slumped, the first genuine emotion breaking through her angry facade. "He left 6 months ago. When the money ran out and the creditors kept coming, he just packed a bag and disappeared. Like father, like daughter, I guess." The bitter attempt at humor fell flat. "I am sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "Are you?" she challenged. "You never liked him." "I did not like how he treated you or how you both treated me. But I never wished for your marriage to fail or for you to be hurt." She looked away, blinking rapidly. "We lost the house. I had to send the kids to live with Thomas's parents because I could not afford the apartment anymore. I am working as a receptionist at a dentist's office, living in a studio apartment, and taking the bus to work. Are you happy now? Has your point been made?" The accusation stung, but I recognized it as another attempt to shift responsibility. "This was never about punishing you, Amanda. It was about breaking a destructive pattern. By running away? Very mature, Dad. I did not run away. I removed myself from a relationship that had become exploitative. There is a difference." Amanda stood suddenly, pacing the small living room. "So what now? You have your peaceful retirement while I struggle to rebuild my life from scratch? While your grandchildren grow up barely knowing you? That depends on you," I said, remaining seated. "I am open to rebuilding our relationship, but only if it is based on mutual respect rather than financial transactions." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I will not be your ATM anymore, Amanda. I love you unconditionally as my daughter, but my financial support now comes with conditions. The primary one being that you take responsibility for your own choices and their consequences." She stopped pacing to stare at me. "You sound like my therapist." This surprised me. "You are seeing a therapist?" Amanda nodded reluctantly. "Part of the divorce process. Thomas claims I am unstable and is fighting for custody of the kids." "And what does your therapist say about our situation?" She sank back onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "That I have spent my life expecting others, especially you, to solve my problems. That I never developed healthy coping mechanisms because I never had to face consequences." Her mouth twisted. "That I might have enabled Thomas's gambling by always finding ways to bail him out, just like you enabled me." Her self-awareness was unexpected, and I had to admit, impressive. "That sounds like a good therapist." "She is. Expensive too. But I am paying for it myself, one session at a time." Amanda said this with a hint of pride that was new to her. "I took a second job on weekends to afford it." We sat in silence for a moment, the hostility between us diminishing into something more complicated. Finally, Amanda spoke again, her voice quieter. "I was so angry when I found that box, humiliated by the list of everything you had given us over the years, devastated by what Mom wrote about me in her journal." She swallowed hard. "But after a few months of therapy, I started to see that you were right. Not about how you left, but about the pattern between us. I could have handled it better," I acknowledged. "The departure, I mean. For that, I am sorry." She nodded, accepting the limited apology. "So where does this leave us? You will not come back to Portland?" "No, Amanda. My life is here now. I have friends, activities, purpose." I hesitated, then added, "I have even met someone." Her eyebrows rose. "A girlfriend? At your age?" I smiled despite myself. "At my age, we generally call them partners, not girlfriends. But yes, her name is Margaret." Amanda absorbed this information, looking around the house with new eyes. "You really have built a whole new life without us. Without the unhealthy dynamic that was destroying us both," I corrected gently. "Not without the possibility of a new, healthier relationship." "What would that even look like?" she asked. And for the first time, I heard genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness. "It would start with honesty, clear boundaries, mutual respect." I leaned forward. "I will not provide financial bailouts anymore, Amanda, but I will support your growth in other ways. I have established educational trusts for William and Emma that will be there when they are ready for college, and I would like to start having regular video calls with them to maintain our relationship." "And with me?" she asked softly. "That depends on you. Are you willing to relate to me as your father, not your banker?" She did not answer immediately, which I actually found encouraging. The old Amanda would have quickly agreed to whatever would get her what she wanted. This Amanda seemed to be considering what the commitment would really mean. "I do not know if I can change overnight," she finally said. 38 years of habits do not disappear just because I recognize they are unhealthy. I am not asking for overnight change, just genuine effort and honesty when you stumble." Amanda wiped at a tear that had escaped. "I miss Mom. She would have known how to fix this. She would have said we need to fix ourselves first. The relationship follows." Our conversation continued through the afternoon, sometimes tense, sometimes tender, as we navigated the beginning of whatever new relationship might be possible between us. When Margaret stopped by, previously scheduled to pick me up for dinner, I introduced her to Amanda. The meeting was awkward but civil. As Amanda prepared to leave for her hotel, she paused at the door. "I am still angry with you, Dad, for leaving the way you did, for not being there this past year. I am not sure when or if that will completely go away." "I understand," I said. "I am still hurt by how you treated me too, but I am willing to work through that if you are." She nodded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Maybe we can both do better." It was not a Hollywood reconciliation with tears and embraces. It was tentative, fragile, and honest. As I watched her drive away in her rental car, I felt neither triumph nor defeat, but something more nuanced. The cautious hope that sometimes broken relationships can be rebuilt into something stronger, not despite the breaks, but because of how carefully we repair them. 2 years after my abrupt departure from Portland, my life bore little resemblance to the isolated existence I had led after Diana's death. My small house in Arizona had become a true home, filled with photographs I had taken, books Margaret had recommended, and mementos from the trips we had enjoyed together. The patio garden Frank had helped me design bloomed with desert-adaptive plants that attracted hummingbirds and butterflies. Margaret and I had married in a simple ceremony at the community center 6 months earlier, surrounded by friends who had become like family. At 69, I had not expected to find love again. Yet there it was, different from what Diana and I had shared, but equally precious in its own way. My relationship with Amanda had evolved into something I would not have recognized 3 years ago. Our weekly video calls rarely included discussions of money. Instead, she shared updates about her life, her ongoing therapy, and her journey toward financial independence. The changes in her were remarkable. She had been promoted at the dental office to office manager, completed a certification in healthcare administration, and moved into a small but comfortable two-bedroom apartment where William and Emma stayed with her on weekends. Thomas remained a peripheral figure, making sporadic contact with his children but little effort to rebuild his relationship with them. His gambling addiction continued to control his life, though this was no longer Amanda's burden to bear. Amanda's therapy had helped her recognize patterns she had learned from our dysfunctional relationship. "I catch myself sometimes, about to call and ask you for money for something I want but do not need," she admitted during one call. "The impulse is still there, but now I recognize it and stop myself. It is like learning a new language." I was proud of her growth, though I kept my expectations realistic. Recovery from entitlement and financial dependency was not linear. There were setbacks, like when she called in tears after her car broke down, implicitly hoping I would offer to pay for repairs. When I instead helped her research affordable mechanics and discussed budgeting for emergencies, she was initially frustrated but later thanked me. "It would have been easier if you had just sent money," she acknowledged, "but I feel better having solved it myself." The grandchildren were another source of healing. Our initial video calls had been awkward, with William and Emma shy around the grandfather they barely knew. Gradually, as I showed genuine interest in their lives without showering them with gifts, they opened up. William shared his fascination with astronomy, while Emma revealed a talent for storytelling that reminded me of Diana. I visited Portland once during those 2 years, staying with Harold rather than imposing on Amanda. The visit included dinner at Amanda's apartment, where she proudly served a home-cooked meal rather than the restaurant takeout she would have defaulted to in the past. Watching her interact with her children, I saw echoes of Diana's nurturing presence that had been overshadowed by entitlement for so many years. My volunteer work had expanded beyond the community to include online financial literacy workshops for seniors across the country. I drew on my professional experience but also my personal journey, teaching others how to establish healthy financial boundaries with adult children without damaging the emotional relationship. The hardest lesson I learned, I would tell participants, was that true love sometimes means allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their choices. It is not abandonment, but respect for their capacity to grow. In June of that 3rd year, I made a significant journey with Margaret. We returned to Portland specifically to visit Diana's grave, something I had not done since leaving. As we stood before the simple headstone, Margaret respectfully gave me a moment alone. "You were right," I told Diana's memory, "about living fully after you were gone, about the problems with Amanda that I refused to see. I wish you could know that she is finally finding her way, and so am I." Later that summer, Amanda brought the children to Arizona for a week-long visit. We showed them the desert landscape, so different from the lush greenery of the Pacific Northwest. William was fascinated by the astronomy club's telescope nights, while Emma collected rocks and created elaborate stories about their origins. On their final evening, Amanda presented me with a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph of Diana that I had never seen before, one capturing her mid-laugh during a family picnic. "I found it when I was going through old albums," Amanda explained. "I thought you might want it." The gift was meaningful not for its monetary value, which was negligible, but because it represented something new, Amanda giving rather than taking, considering my feelings rather than just her own. It was a small gesture but significant in the context of our history. "Thank you," I said simply, too moved for elaborate words. That night, after they had returned to their hotel to prepare for their early flight, Margaret found me on the patio, contemplating the stars. "You are quiet," she observed, settling beside me. "Just reflecting," I replied. 3 years ago, I never imagined Amanda and I could have a relationship that was not defined by financial dependency. I never thought I would find someone like you or build this life for myself. "What was the turning point?" Margaret asked. "What made it possible?" I considered the question carefully, learning that love without boundaries is not really love at all, but fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of loss. True love requires the courage to say no when necessary, to allow people to face challenges and grow from them. "That is a hard lesson," Margaret acknowledged. "The hardest I have ever learned," I agreed. Breaking a pattern established over decades required walking away completely. It was drastic, and I still question whether I could have found a gentler way. But sometimes a clean break is the only way to begin healing properly. The following month brought an unexpected symbol of how far Amanda had come. She called to tell me she had received a small bonus at work and had used it not for a luxury purchase as she once would have, but to open savings accounts for William and Emma. "It is not much yet," she said, "but I want them to understand money differently than I did growing up, to see it as something to manage responsibly, not as an emotional tool or an endless resource." Her words reflected the most important lesson from our journey, that financial patterns are rarely just about money. They are about power, love, self-worth, and the complex dynamics that shape our closest relationships. As I look back on the path that brought me here, from the desperate demand for $300,000 to the healthy, boundaried relationship Amanda and I are building now, I recognize that disappearing without warning was an extreme solution to an extreme problem. It required courage I did not know I possessed and caused pain I never wanted to inflict. Yet sometimes the most difficult decisions are also the most necessary ones. By refusing to continue enabling behavior that harmed both Amanda and myself, I created space for authentic growth and connection. By valuing my own financial security and emotional well-being, I modeled the self-respect I hoped Amanda would develop. The box I left behind that day contained financial statements and Diana's journal, but its true contents were more valuable. The truth about our relationship and the possibility of building something healthier from the ruins of what had failed. If you are struggling with a family member who sees you as a financial resource rather than a person with your own needs and limitations, I hope my story offers both courage and caution. Setting boundaries is essential, but so is leaving the door open for genuine change. The journey is rarely smooth or simple, but the destination, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation, is worth every difficult step along the way. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the most loving choice you can make, both for yourself and for those who have become dependent on your enabling. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the wisdom and strength to navigate your own challenging relationships with both kindness and clarity.